Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute, a podcast that celebrates the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. For season 2, we are delving into Blazing Saddles, one Mongo-only pawn in Game of Life minute at a time. I'm Alan Sanders, I'm your host.
I am Walt Murray, your co-host.
And it's our pleasure to welcome back attorney Brad Stevens to our show. Welcome back, Brad.
I'm glad to be back, Alan. I hope I didn't damage myself too much in the last minute.
Well, you'll only know after it airs.
Okay, well, that's good.
If all of a sudden... If after the date comes and you realize everyone has canceled their appointments for the rest of the day, you might be able to draw a correlation.
Yeah, and I haven't had a lot of defriending on Facebook going on or anything like that either, so I'm pretty good to go.
Thankfully, this airs before football season, college football season starts again, so you should be good.
Yeah, that's fine. As long as Auburn doesn't have a prevailing role in this thing, we're good to
go. We apologize to all of our Auburn listeners. No, actually, we don't.
No, not at all. I don't apologize.
If you guys ever listen, Brad, sometimes guests on WBHF AM 1450 on Wednesdays at 9 o'clock for 3 and Out, and then sometimes also on Fridays during the school year for Bartow Sports Zone as a sports analyst of sorts. We know Brad has a certain dislike of certain schools, and Auburn is probably at the top of that list.
They're on their own list by themselves.
All right, let's go ahead and remind everybody where we are today for this minute number 64. We're going to continue with the Waco kid questioning Mongo, saying, maybe you know, why is a high roller like Hedley Lamar? And we're going to end with actually a pretty nice-looking outdoor shot of the railroad crew continuing their work on the rail line with the theme music playing a la harmonica form in the background. So, Walt, I'm going to go ahead and start off with you on this one. I mentioned yesterday as we were wrapping up, I love how all of a sudden the wheels start turning in the Waco kid's head because he suddenly starts putting two and two together. Now, wait a minute. Why would somebody, and this is exactly what he says.
Listen, Mongo, maybe you know, why is a high roller like Hedley Lamar interested in Rock Ridge?
It's a good question. If you're on their side and you don't have the insight there as to what's going on, this is a small town in the middle of a barren wasteland that shouldn't really be on anybody's radar.
Now, I mean, you're a private investigator by trade. We all grew up watching Scooby-Doo. Is this what we would call a clue?
This would be a clue.
Did we stumble across a clue?
This would be a clue or a red flag or an indicator that there's something going on, yes.
And, going on the legal side of things, you've asked me that before. There's the eminent domain question here, but it's not, normally it's the state that's trying to take things from you, but it seems like this railroad is privately owned, so it'll be a little bit different.
Well, that's actually an interesting point you brought up. It's not so much that the railroad's privately owned. They realize the railroad's going to end up going through Rock Ridge, and Hedley wants to drive everyone out so he can scoop up the land for nothing and then have to sell it to the railroad for a high price.
And a lot of people have said that about some of how the interstates were built in this state, that certain people got certain information and were able to buy up all the land where the interstates are supposed to be. And then the state came through and they were like, we need to buy all this land. And these people were like, oh, do you now?
Oh, well, I was planning to retire here, but...
Strangely enough, it's for sale.
This land has been in our family for minutes.
Yeah. It's been for Jenna minutes.
The 7 months that we've owned this land has been some of the best of our lives.
My great-great-grandfather had no idea.
Do you know how many dreams we had invested in this? That's a good point. I mean, sometimes, unfortunately, that's how it works in politics. We've seen they're already mocking politics in this movie, Walt, that when you do get privileged information, sometimes they use it for their own financial gain.
No. Alan,
I'm shocked
Come on.
to hear that.
Yeah, there are some dastardly people out there trying to use Old West terms.
One of my professors in college said that it's interesting to watch the progression of someone hears about politics and 5 minutes later becomes more cynical. It's just, you just figure out real quick that politics attracts some unsavory people, and it just is what it is.
I saw a great meme, Walt, today. It said something about, it was about politics. A stand-up comedian said, I treat politics like I treat the check engine light on my car. I driving down there and I see the check engine light come on and I'm staring at it and I realize that I don't have enough money to fix it. So I just wait until it hopefully will go away.
But it never does.
It never goes away.
It actually only gets worse.
Yeah, that's right.
Don't stare at the check engine light or politics because it only gets worse.
That's right.
Yeah, that's like politics are like a knee injury. It's degenerative.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, you know what? I didn't get a chance to ask you this yesterday, Brad. You bring up eminent domain. Let's talk about Hedley's big plan. How legal do you think this is to try to find a way to drive people out of town so he can scoop up the land for cheap?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cases like that go on now. Eminent domain, condemnation, whatever you want to call them. That's done legally, like forcing people off of their homes and out of their homes. Eminent domain. The issue you have with that now is that the government comes in and says, we need your land, and they offer you a very low ball offer. Mm-hmm. And you don't like that because it's your home or it's your land. And then you hire an attorney, hopefully it's a very specialized field. You hire a very good, aggressive attorney who will either settle for much more than that or take them to trial and get a jury to decide what your land's really worth. There's been some really good verdicts in this county and in the counties around here because, there's some people who've had their land taken. But going around and just beating people up and throwing them off the land. Yeah, don't think you get away with that now, even remotely. But back then, I'm sure it probably did happen. I'm sure that there were threats and extortion and coercion that happened. I mean, it's underground now, but I mean, back then, I'm sure it was a lot more.
Well, Walt, remember when we had Jim Dunham in here as our Western historian, we talked about how many stories that ended up in Westerns is about land grabs and people wanting other people's land. And you had private ranchers, and then you started having bigger conglomerates saying, I want your land. And they'd start range wars.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, you remember the movie Young Guns? Young Guns, too?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
that was highly accurate.
Basically.
Just like Billy the Kid.
Yeah, right, yeah. But, I mean, that's what
but that's what was behind it.
That's what caused the whole thing was range wars. Open range. The movie Open Range. What's that about? Free grazers versus the established people. I mean, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the sad Native American stories where they were all basically forced completely off of their land.
Well, they're such children. They don't know what they're doing with the land.
Yeah.
By the way, folks, if you're just now coming in this episode, that was a quote from Hedley Lamar talking about how much it was going to cost to get 200,000 acres. A box of these.
That's right.
That's right.
Nice paddleball games. Well, and you can't separate the history of the United States from land and transportation, and that is what America has been all about. It's been about expansion and growth, and I mean, you do see now still there's in the county next to us, they're going through a big thing over wanting to build a shopping center, and there are people who own the property around there, and now the war is starting to heat up, and I think it's all over. Okay, we're willing to move, but you better write a big check.
Yeah, I mean, here in Bartow County, you're talking about that. I mean, we don't have a bowling alley and a skating rink anymore, and that's what it kind of came from. That is that some other people wanted it, and there was a big legal battle over it. I think and it lasted a few years, but now that intersections have changed drastically. I don't know all the facts of that case, so I can't really comment too much on it. But it involved the taking of land from one person or another. So people got paid, but things got done.
I'm gonna throw a wrench and say there's now a way to use the law on the other side. We've watched where we know that everyone, a large percentage want, let's say, a northern arc, a different way of being able to get from one side of the state to the other, and all of a sudden you have a municipality or something scoop up and say, oh, wait a minute, we want to declare this an environmental haven or some kind of a preserve, which automatically puts a whole new wrench into things, and they're trying to use the law from that side, environmental protection laws, to try to stop you from being able to put a road in.
They've been talking about a northern arc since I was a kid. Now they've gotten a little bit more serious about it recently, and they're saying that might be done as early as 2029, but that's 10 years from now. So they've already plotted and planned that it's going to take a minute to get that done. There's going to be a lot of fighting over that, no doubt. I mean, it's not like taking Rock Ridge,
right?
Okay, no. There's like there's several 100,000 people in between.
We can't work up a number 6 on him?
Well, I keep hoping somebody will come along and offer me a bunch of money for my land. I'm like,
I never seem to have the right property.
If you gallop into Kingston, Georgia, and try to wallop and whack everybody in there, they'll probably kill you. So
Georgia isn't really the place to be doing that.
Don't try that here.
Don't go to Kingston or Ackworth or Cassville or anywhere like that. You start a number 6 on those people, they'll number 6 you.
Well, there's actually a town here close by.
Oh, you're doing the number 6. Yeah. We're all the way up to 13 here.
Right. Yeah. Well, here they're like, we're up to the 12 gauge.
Yeah, it's a 27 we're at.
Yeah, there's a town here nearby, Kennesaw, where if you own property, you are required to own a handgun or own a gun.
A gun. Some means of protecting yourself and those around you. Funny, it also happens to be one of the lowest crime cities in the area.
Murder there in about 35 years.
That reminded me of that line from Wayne's World.
Yeah.
Remember Wayne's World?
Mm-hmm.
He goes, "You bought me a gun rack. I don't even own a gun, let alone many guns that would necessitate a gun rack."
Well, back here in the jail cell, they want to know, what's a high roller like Hedley Lamar? What is it? What's going on? And he goes,
Don't know. Got to do with where choo-choo go.
that was a pretty good indication of what we're back to the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, it pretty much answers our question.
It does. But then he says,
Mongo, why would Hedley Lamar care about where the choo-choo goes?
He goes,
Don't know. Mongo only pawn in game of life.
is that one of the most quoted lines of this movie?
It has to
Mongo only pawn in game of life.
Yeah, no doubt about it, because it's once again irony that the dumbest guy in the whole movie waxing philosophical about his role in the movie and in life in itself, which is not something you expect to come out of his mouth.
No, I love it. It's almost like that. The irony. You talked about how you liked irony yesterday in yesterday's episode. I remember you saying that, and it's ironic to have this big goof all of a sudden start talking about like this very philosophical thing. I'm just a pawn in the game of life. Like, oh my God. And there's another chess analogy, which we've gotten from both Jim, and we've talked about how Bart is really a chess player in real life. He's always 2 moves ahead of everybody.
Well, and it is a very deep thing for him to understand.
Yes.
That, life happens to him.
It's like when you say something insightful, I'm like, oh, wow.
I call them my Mongo minutes.
You're Mongo.
Well, if you think about the pawn on a chessboard, I mean, I don't want to say I guess it's the most limited piece that you have.
Well,
it's the most easy to sacrifice.
But that's what pawns are there for, to set up the more powerful pieces to put them in a position to win.
Right, and that's, I guess he sees himself, he was definitely the pawn in the Taggart.
Right, it's what he says is 100% accurate. The idea that he knows and is able to comprehend that's what's amazing.
But when he gets into Bart's camp, he becomes a little bit more than that. He's more like a knight.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's see. He turns over knights, though, because later we're going to see him like actually pushing horses over. Yeah. So maybe he's more like a rook.
Yeah, like straight on, just
just straight on. He goes in straight lines.
Yeah,
there's not a whole lot of zigzagging to Mongo.
There's no zigging and zagging. He just goes straight up.
There we go. So Mongo's a rook or a castle, depending on which side of the pond you learn how to play chess. But he's just a pawn right now.
I'm so. I don't want to say I'm not scatterbrained. I'm so ADD that I can't focus on a chess game long enough.
Really?
Yeah, about 15, 20 minutes, I'm tapped out. I'm ready to go do something else.
I'll see. I love playing chess. What about you, Walt?
I can play chess. I actually, this is kind of an odd thing about me. When I was in the Philippines, I met the guy who was the number 4 chess player in the world. That was probably
Did he just look at you and laugh?
The shortest chess game in the history of the world that I played against him. You actually played him? Oh yeah. I played against.
Okay, so I'm going to take back everything smarmy I was about to say. That's awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
That's
like that's cool.
Super nice guy. And he beat the socks off me. And it was so bad that in the second game he was like, "Okay, here's what you need to do." He's trying to help me along, and I was like, but it was really cool to play against him just because you could see how the mental gears worked.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, I'm not a chess player.
It's another level of intelligence right there trying to do that. I mean, it really is.
No, I'm more of a backgammon player. I enjoy playing backgammon. I'm okay at it.
There's a little strategy to that. Not a lot, but there's a little.
There's more strategy than you think if you're playing people who are really good. I mean,
there is. I mean, you still have the luck of the roll of the dice.
But I think that chess is probably, if not the most strategic board game. It's definitely
there's that old, what's the saying in sports, and it's things that he's playing chess and everybody else is playing checkers.
Right.
Somebody who's really smart. I mean, there's a reason why it's said that way.
Well, I think with this
even
guy,
if you don't know the games, you know why that's a thing.
That's it. Yeah, there's a whole lot more to it.
And the guy I played, he was playing chess. I was playing badminton. It was not even.
You were playing.
I was merely a pawn in the game of chess.
You were his pawn.
It was brutal, but it was it's cool.
You were one of the you were one of the you were one of the moles and whack-a-mole. Just
I think
whack-a-mole.
He made me a better person, and I made him a worse chess player because he's like, how can you make me that dumb?
What's the movie that monologue comes from, where he's like, we are all dumber now for having listened to you?
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
I reward you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
May God have mercy on your soul. I love that line goes, we are all now dumber for having listened to you. You've literally brought the intelligence of the room down.
Well, I know at the end of the first game, I was like, what the sandhill just happened
I think we have a new tagline for the Wilder Ride.
Everyone's now dumber for having
you are now dumber for listening.
You are now
to
dumber for having listened to the show.
And everybody's like, yeah, you got that right.
That's why every episode seems funnier than the last.
That's
I'm
right.
slowly getting dumber myself.
That was one of the best like 30-second quote in the movie history right there.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah,
it is absolutely fabulous.
Nothing
Maybe
that
the
you
best
said
part of the movie.
Could you consider it a rational thought? I reward you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
All right, I'm going to insert that here.
Well, did you notice right when he says, after he says that he's merely a pawn, he reaches his hand out and he almost punches.
He's yawning
Sheriff
again.
Bart in the crotch.
Yeah, well, I don't think he was mentioning meaning to it. It's just the idea of like,
yeah, caught it.
And he takes all of his effort to kind of catch it. Like,
and he stops him and jumps
he
back.
Gently pats it. Like, let's just put this back where it's safe, right in your own lap.
Yeah, and I don't remember catching that my first few times through, but sometime, I don't know, 10 years ago.
See, there's an example of something subtle. You know, we talked about earlier how comedy has kind of changed. There's a nice little subtle thing. It's a little slapsticky because it's physical, but it doesn't draw a whole lot of attention. It just continuously reinforces Mongo's a beast.
Yeah. And it's just kind of a funny, good side slip.
I wonder if teenagers of this era would understand any of the humor in this movie at all.
Teenagers in 1974?
No, teenagers now.
Now, I don't
Depends. Who were they raised by? Because my girls like it.
Right. I mean, I guess it depends on what walk of life you're from. I mean, I think a lot of this humor would be lost to them because I don't think they would understand why it would be funny in the first place.
And I think a lot of them wouldn't get past the initial use of some of the words.
Yeah, and they wouldn't be able to deal with it.
Why is that
It's
funny?
so
He fainted. He's obviously needs water. Like, wait, you're missing the point.
Yeah. I can't believe that people were so mean they came in and destroyed this town.
The affairs of state take precedence over the affairs of state. I mean, how can you not laugh at that? And but I don't think they would get that. And, there are some funny movies out now. Don't get me wrong, but the humor now today, I say like the humor that's funny now for people is like the movie Horrible Bosses.
Yes,
you've seen that. I mean, that's a funny movie, but like
I watched about 15 or 20 minutes of it, and I was like, okay,
it's like too much. It's like you're only giving me you're giving me like as much as much pudding as I want, but it's only one flavor, and that's all I get to have. I don't get to have anything else.
And I really like some of the actors in it.
Yeah,
I said this earlier. Someone asked, well, are there any movies today that are as quotable, that have as much depth and as many different kind of layers to jokes? And I said the only one I can come up with is Deadpool.
Deadpool's hilarious.
Mm-hmm. Deadpool may be the closest you get to what we grew up with these kinds of movies, where you go rewatch it, even though you've seen it maybe a dozen times, and all of a sudden you'll pick up on a new joke, or you'll realize why something was funny.
Wait! You may be wondering why the red suit. Well, that's so bad guys can't see me bleed. This guy's got the right idea. He wore the brown pants. Cue the music.
X gon' give it to you. Wait for you to get it. What the? X gon' deliver to you.
Reeks like old lady pants in here.
Why such a douche this morning?
Oh, God.
You are hard to look at. You look like the topographical map of Utah.
Oh, I am very turned on right now.
Let's go give it to you. He gon' give it to you.
You are haunting. You look like an avocado had sex with an older avocado.
Thank you. Greetings, Munchkins. Did you like that dose of Green Band goodness? Hankering for a little more action? Some big boy curse words, maybe? Check out DeadpoolWebsite.com for my Red Band trailer. Make sure to ask your mommy and tell her to call me. She's got the number.
I mean, and you're quoting it. Like, that's one of the last, because remember we talked about this with BK on the air. Who quotes movies anymore like that? Like, we quote all these movies that we grew up with. We quote movies from Raiders and Jaws and Star Wars and stuff like that. Deadpool was one of the more recent movies that all of a sudden I find myself quoting Deadpool.
I quote, I mean, there's some movies I quote every day, and it just happens because I've watched them so many times and it's so relevant to my life and the things that happened to me. Coming to America, which is one of the funniest movies ever made.
No doubt.
Yeah, Coal Miner's Daughter, just because I love that movie, and I thought Tommy Lee Jones was just superb in it. Sissy Spacek won the best actress for that movie.
And don't forget our friend Beverly D'Angelo was in it.
Mm-hmm, that's right, yes. And I think she actually sang her parts, and she did very well.
That's how she earned the part.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I didn't know that was her voice.
Oh, yeah.
And Big Lebowski, that comes into play with me
Big Lebowski.
every single day.
Talk about for people who like that, one of maybe one of the best of the Coen brothers movies in terms of comedy. I could watch The Big Lebowski at any point. If I'm flipping, I'm like, I will just finish the movie from here. Thank you.
It's a lot like Blazing Saddles in that I don't know how the Blazing Saddles did at the box office, but The Big Lebowski did not do well at the box office at all.
Blazing Saddles was the huge surprise hit, being the overall number one at the box office, making $119 million in 1974. We inflated that for what it would have been today, over $600 million just domestic box office. That's
only $600 million, huh?
Yeah, that's what it was converted to 2019 dollars.
And what did it cost? $3 million to make.
$3 million made 119. And oh, by the way, he had this other small movie, Young Frankenstein, also released in 1974, that came in fourth overall in the box office. In terms
Big Lebowski's up. I mean, it was it was minimal success at the box office.
Right.
Later on, it became a cult classic that's quoted every day, and now this one's quoted every day too, but it's from a different generation.
Wait, let me explain something to you. I am not Mr. Lebowski. I'm the dude. You know, that or his dudeness or duder or, El Duderino if you're not into the whole brevity thing.
Are you employed, Mr. Lebowski?
Employed?
You like sex, Mr. Lebowski?
Is this your only ID? You got the wrong guy. I'm the dude.
Your name's Lebowski.
Jeff Lebowski, the other Lebowski, the millionaire. I received this ransom note this morning.
This is a bummer, man.
Say, dude, where is your car?
Who's got your undies, Walter?
This is a very complicated case, Maud. You know, a lot of ins, a lot of outs.
It don't matter to Jesus.
This could be a lot more complex. I mean, it might not be just such a simple,
So The Big Lebowski, that was a 90s movie, though.
98.
So end of the 90s. Deadpool, which is a 2016 when it came out, the first one, or 15, 16, and then the most recent one was 2018. Have there been any other kind of quotable movies like that? Especially comedies, though, specifically comedies.
Not really, and I think one of the things about movies like this, and we've talked about it, is that you can throw one of these lines out, and if people respond to you and laugh and go, oh yeah, and they come back with another line, it's almost like pinging people around you to see if they're fans.
Well, it also tells me that's the kind of people I like hanging out with, because they're going to get my humor too.
You're right. Another movie I quote a lot is A League of Their Own.
Oh yeah.
I love that movie so much. I thought Penny Marshall did great with that movie. I was on a subway in New York, and there was a child who was on the subway acting crazy and had stuff thrown out all over the floor and was just screaming and just disrupting everybody else's day. But I'm a patient guy. It doesn't bother me, but it was bothering a lot of people around me. The mom was just so stressed out. So when they finally got to their stop, she's picking up all the toys and all the junk the kid had thrown everywhere. And she picked him up, and he's screaming and wailing and flailing. And I said, let's not go to the World Series without Stillwell's toys. And one girl across the subway car pointed at me and goes, A League of Their Own. Yes.
It's like you suddenly have found a friend.
There's my friend right there. She goes, that's the perfect line.
Well, I tend to quote obscure lines from obscure movies that nobody else has watched. And so people tend to look at me like, what in the hell are you talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, when you have your own personal favorites, but I'm talking about like these where so many people would just know.
What I was going to say was, this is the kind of movie that more unified culture than anything. I think Bad News Bears was like that too, because everybody my age saw the Bad News Bears, played baseball, and would just quote lines from it.
I love that.
And Slapshot, for anybody who's ever played much hockey, like everybody knows every line.
But once again, you're helping to prove my point. There are not many new movies that do what the movies that we grew up with did.
Yeah.
All older movies. And you can quote John Wayne movies now, and people will be like, "Oh yeah, because."
Well, do people quote John Wayne, or do they quote a caricature of John Wayne? Like what they think John Wayne was. They've never seen a single John Wayne movie.
Or you quote made up political lines from Saturday Night Live,
right?
But you don't have those unifying things anymore, and I think that the way that entertainment is going is in some ways positive because you have more options for entertainment, but it fragments culture a little bit more. You don't because you don't have those unifying things. Like everybody doesn't sit down and watch the newest Marvel thing that just came out on Netflix, or I guess it's now coming out on something else. But not everybody sits down and watches it all at the same time, so you don't have those unifying lines like you used to.
I remember. You remember when TNT for me, the old channel TNT used to be. It was NBA basketball, and then like that 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock p.m. slot where they would show like an old Western or some of those old movies like this, at the end of the night where, they could get away with a little bit more. Or, but that's when they would show a John Wayne movie or a Clint Eastwood movie. Those things now are relegated to AMC, maybe, if you're lucky. But, you don't see a Fistful of Dollars or The Shootist or any of that on TV anymore.
No, and this month is probably the first time that I've been really excited about all the choices on Netflix and Amazon Prime, because you've got Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, you've got Bridge at Remagen, you've got all these really good like 70s and 80s movies that they've just dropped this month. So I was texting back and forth with my brother today. I was like, you can't believe what's on. And so, we're both going back and forth with all these lines. And again, it kind of goes back to they're just not. I can't see my kids 20 years from now quoting anything that came out today as something that really unifies their age group.
I keep watching my daughters, and I won't be able to figure this out for probably another 5 or 10 years. I don't know the movies they quote.
No,
they quote memes all the time.
They do. They quote.
They know memes, and they'll whip out a meme or an old Vine like phrase or saying. And they'll just start cackling.
Or something from YouTube.
Yeah. Like when my daughters, I don't know if you ever saw the Vine where they saw like free avocados or fresh avocados, but it was like spelled a little weird. And the girl goes, look, free shavakadoos. My girls say that all the time. I think that's one of the funniest things in the world. Free shavakadoos.
I haven't either.
Every now and then you catch a good like little Vine or a little blip from YouTube that's really funny, like the one you showed me the other day with the guy
with the beer,
with the beer in the glass and the water in the glass.
Oh yeah,
that's perfect.
That was awesome.
Somebody sent me one the other day. It's a 7-second clip, and this is the kind of humor that's funny to me.
Well, that's a Vine. 6 seconds.
They roll, a bale of hay, like the giant bales of hay that sit. They rolled it down the hill, and the guy was at the bottom of the hill, and he tried to jump over this rolling bale of hay. And, of course, he only got about halfway up, and that hay hits him. It spun him like 15 times in the air. Awesome. You have to look that up, because he's lucky. Those things weigh a lot. If he didn't even jump at all, he could have been killed.
Yeah.
But
that goes back to what our old saying I explained to people down here in the South. When someone's about to do something stupid, the phrase usually is, hey, y'all, hold my beer.
Yeah, watch this.
Yep. He's like, hey, y'all, watch this. Or when somebody says, you can't top that, then they say, hey, hold my beer.
Yeah, and then you run.
Well, we're talking about quotable lines. This line is about Mongo only pawn in game of life. Bart suddenly gets the idea, and he says,
choo-choo. I think this might be a good time to mosey out where they're building on the railroad and maybe do a little snooping.
And it dissolves to the railroad scene. But let us return to the script. And remember, Walt, I said it looked like when Gene Wilder decided to take on the role, or was finally, come help us because our actor is upside down spouting out green crap. Gene did not want to say anything related to the N-word. And we saw how he changed, or they completely dropped whole lines that were written for the Waco Kid. Here's another example coming up. Because right after Bart says, maybe go out there and do a little snooping. Great transition line. What was supposed to happen is Jim then says, maybe a little snooping, maybe a lot of dying. You are one crazy nigga. I don't understand you. You're acting like a sheriff. To which Bart says, that's what it says on the star. Come on. Mongo says, but what about Mongo lunch? Bart says, the stage from Yuma will be set in 2. Eat the horses.
I don't know. I'm glad they left all that out too.
I am
Yes.
too.
Yeah.
That's not.
First of all, I don't like the Waco Kid using the N-word at all.
No.
And I think Gene Wilder was right to either argue with Mel or just choose not to do it because he never once says anything close.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to even picture Gene ever saying the word.
Well, it goes completely against who the Waco Kid is.
That's right.
It doesn't make any sense. Even if he's saying it in sort of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge way, it still doesn't feel right coming out of basically Bart's number 2.
I also agree with what you said. Too many words.
Yeah.
It's not really funny.
No.
And it doesn't move the plot along at all.
No, and then the whole idea of like, how many people know the 3:15 to Yuma? And then it goes, well, the stage from Yuma will be set at 2. Eat the horses. I mean, it's just
I don't
like
get that.
Yeah.
I love that they dropped all of that. This is another example of either careful editing or I actually believe that Gene Wilder just chose. I'm not saying this line.
Yeah.
It doesn't. First of all, it doesn't make any sense. Why do we need him to say you're acting like a sheriff? We've already seen him defeat Mongo.
He is the sheriff
went
at this
to
point.
save the town that called him names earlier that day.
And there's not a question at this point. He is the sheriff.
Right.
Like, nobody's doubting that.
And the audience doesn't need to be shown that again. We don't need him to go, that's what it says on the star. I mean, that's just,
Right.
maybe today's audience would need that. They wouldn't understand it. But, no, we were smarter back then.
Well, he's not and the Waco Kid, like you said, doesn't really go along with his character. He's not a bumbling Neanderthal. All the people that are saying it are all idiot Neanderthals.
Right.
Like he doesn't fit that bill at all. He just drinks.
The line about you're acting like a sheriff may have been better in their first meeting. It is not
right. If he was going to say that when he says, no, don't take, don't do that. I'm putting your guns on. If you shoot him, it'll just make him mad. And if he had said, well, I still got to do something, he goes, what, you think you're acting like a sheriff?
Like a sheriff. Yeah, that might have
it would have
been
worked
a little
then
bit more
because that's the first time he goes to, quote, rescue the town that, like I said, called him a bad name earlier that day.
Or when he was going out, he said he was going to go walk around and he was like, yeah, that's not really a good idea. And he said, do me a favor, don't go out there. And he said, well, I'm going. That might have been a better line then.
Yeah. It doesn't work here.
Does not work here.
Not at all.
Way too late in the film.
I love this dissolve, and there's no more lines for today, but I love this dissolve to the railroad because we do end on him. Maybe go out there and do a little snooping. It's a perfect script writing 101. You show, you don't tell. You show.
Mm-hmm.
He says, maybe it's time to go do a little snooping. The minute he says that, we're dissolving to where we're about to head. It's a perfect transition line. You don't need any more explanation. We get, as an audience, we're heading to the railroad. This is our next scene. We're about to see the sheriff show up. We don't need to even wait for him to show up. We know he's coming.
Well, this does kind of go back to what we've talked about once or twice over the last couple of years, that there's a tendency when you write to over-explain things.
Yes.
That you can show on the screen. And maybe that was kind of what was going on there, that they were just they just over-explained it. And
you know what I love about this scene of the railroad? And maybe this is one of those little small details. Do you remember when we last watched the railroad? We were basically in the middle of the desert. I didn't see any mountains this close to them. This looks like they set up a completely new area, or at least filmed from a completely new angle to make it look like they had made progress on the railroad. We don't look like we're back to the first railroad tracks at the beginning of the movie.
No, and I can't remember, was this set, was this filmed in that area around in Southern California where all that other stuff was filmed?
The rocks, was it called? The something rocks?
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called. If BK was
BK's yelling at us.
Yeah. But that does kind of, in the background, kind of looks like that area. If you look at that on the map, there are some good flat open areas.
The Vasquez rocks.
Right. Yeah, I was wondering if that was at the Vasquez Park. But yeah, it is, and you're coming up into a more mountainous area. And I guess that would explain,
I think so, yeah. Looking at a couple of pictures, it does look like we're heading into that area that they would have called the Vasquez Rocks. That a lot of, it's in California, it's close to Hollywood, and you can shoot a lot of stuff that looks either like alien or different or barren.
Yeah, and it's definitely in the desert.
Yeah.
And
so I want to point out just a few things before we wrap up this scene. And I don't know if we get another angle at it. First off, in the very foreground, we see guys using some old timber lifters, which very accurate. I was very impressed. You got these 4 laborers struggling to lift a railroad tie and stack it into this pile that's going to be used for later work. We see the railroad car come in. But I wanted to ask you something. In the back corner, what is that structure? Because I initially thought, what's a boat doing out there?
I was going to say it looks like an ark.
I can't figure out what that is in the background, just above the guys that are lifting the railroad tie. And right around second, 43, 44, it starts to kind of push in a little bit with the harmonica playing. It looks like the back end of a boat or like an ark, or is it just a big pool? Is it like a big bowl? Is that like Paul Bunyan eating his soup there?
Over, or is that's the?
Well, that's all that we're going to have for this minute. I can't look ahead, otherwise it'd be tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never noticed that. That's a very intricate detail.
I mean, look at that.
I think it's just showing you how far off course the SS Minnow really got.
The SS Minnow.
Hey, little buddy.
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale.
We're at the Vasquez Rocks.
I mean, they've got a couple of these old-style pup tents set up. They've got the chuck wagon set up. They've got some cooking fires going. The railroad guys are all working. You've got some, basically your implements all around. But I can't figure out what that structure is just behind the guys that are lifting the railroad tie. It's I swear it looks like the back half of a boat.
It does.
And now I can notice that once a Big Lebowski, it's not the guys that built the railroad here. The Chinese guys.
Yeah.
Chinaman is not the issue.
Chinaman is not the right nomenclature.
Yeah. It was Asian American, please.
Well, we could start quoting that movie now.
Easily. Yeah.
Let's go ahead very quickly as this does come to an end. We see the return of Charlie walking toward or just past the guys that are loading all the railroad ties.
Yes, and Charlie starts to become a very important figure moving forward.
Yeah, he's going to a barrel and he grabs a ladle, and that is just about where we're about to end. So we'll find out what that barrel is, the ladle, what that is. We'll also look at whether or not Mel Brooks made a camera placement mistake coming from the backside and reestablishing the 180-degree frame. But for now, as we start to wrap this up, and by the way, I love this little transition of the music, the theme of Blazing Saddles, but done slowly with the harmonica. It really, I think, sets the mood for this scene as well.
It does, and you definitely know that you're headed back out to the desert for some good rustic, scenic...
For some snooping.
Snooping.
And dying.
We left that out.
Yeah. Glad
Brad,
they left that out.
You've been our guest for the last couple of days. You get to go first again. Are there any other notes you had about this minute that we might not have covered?
Well, they talk about people like Hedley Lamar. That's the kind of funny thing is like there's a lot of Hedley Lamars out here now, in this world, and and there's a lot of Sheriff Barts too. And I always hope that there are a whole lot more Sheriff Barts out there these days.
Let's hope.
Yeah, let's hope, and a lot less Hedley Lamars. Because for all the villains in movies over time, I always thought, in the back of my mind, Hedley Lamar is definitely one of the worst villains ever in a movie. He's such a bad person through and through.
Yeah.
So
There's really nothing redeeming.
Yeah, there's nothing redeeming about Hedley Lamar.
But yet Mel Brooks handles him in just the right way. We can still laugh and enjoy him. We don't despise him so much that we can't stand him on screen. We like watching what he's going to do, and it's funny what he does. We just want to see him get his own. We want to see him reach some just ends.
Right, yeah. I mean, you want to see him, take his medicine, but
right.
But you don't just absolutely despise him in the end. But yeah, I think he represents he encompasses not the serious side. There's not much serious about this movie, but
I think he's the embodiment of what Mel Brooks was trying to attack with this movie. He thinks that everyone's beneath him. He can do whatever he wants. He's the privileged guy. He's got power. He's in government. He's got people that will do whatever he wants, and yet he's using it all for the wrong reasons. And right. Bart is the exact opposite. He's got nothing, but does everything for the right reasons, and eventually starts to win. All of those assets from Hedley all become his tools.
Yeah, so I think Hedley Lamar is not. He represents a broader scheme as a character. He's that. Like you said, he's the government. He's the taken from the little man, robbing from the little man to get his own and help him and his friends only. And I think that's what makes him despicable. But in the end, it's Mel Brooks, as only Mel Brooks can do. He made it funny.
Yeah, did make it funny. Well, any other notes you have?
One other thing I was going to mention is, this movie, again, filmed in 73, released in 74. I like some of the terminology that is not used as much anymore. And one of the terms that he says, and you hear this sometimes, but high roller. I remember hearing that a lot when I was a kid, but that's kind of a term that isn't used as much.
Is that faded, or do you just think you don't hear it as much? Because I know exactly what that means. What's a high roller?
I think we know what it means, but you don't hear it as much anymore.
Yeah, high roller is not. That's. I think that fizzled out in the 80s, maybe.
I think so.
I don't know. People now, I don't know what.
What do you call the person that's got, like, would be the high stakes gambler,
Well, that's like, I guess people now who are high rollers, you just go on Facebook and post all your pictures of everything that you have.
Right.
People do. That's why I call it fraud book a lot.
Yeah. I think maybe narcissistic ass.
Yeah, maybe.
Call them. So, yeah, I don't know. I'll have to ask my kids if they know what that means.
All right. So. A little experiment, because it seems to work for me. But you're right. Maybe it may be a little more antiquated, but do we not know what it means?
Well, high roller, it's a gambling term from what I've gathered.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
the person who can enter let's say the house minimum is $5,000 versus $5.
Yeah, it's like the baccarat room, where you can't even walk in the door unless you have $25,000 to put down.
Mm-hmm. Right,
that's the high roller room.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we all know
so
that that's
today
the
they would
guy
just
who's always got money, and
today they just say the uber rich.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the 1%.
What would be the 1%? Oh, maybe that's what they would say. So, what's a 1%er like Hedley Lamar doing?
There you go. Or he's got stupid money. That's what people say.
Stupid money.
Really interesting that people say that. He's got stupid money.
Mm-hmm.
Like Donald Trump's got stupid money. I've heard people say that.
People that don't have it always say that, but then once they get it, they never want to change their minds.
No,
they don't want to give it away. They want to keep it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the first thing I want to do when I get money is I want to give it away.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
Well, I give it to the things. I give it away all right now to my kids.
Yeah,
I don't see any of it.
No, I will be giving it all away to charity, not to a bank account in the Cayman Islands.
So. All right. So as we wrap this up, before we set the stage for Friday, we've got one more episode this week. Brad, you are also beyond an attorney, and if somebody's in the North Georgia area and needs your services, that's one thing. But you're actually a very funny guy, and you are an author. You've written a humorous book about life in Cassville, the whole idea of the small southern store, the general store that everybody knew, everyone went down to. That's where you did all your gossiping, your haggling, a lot of sales went on, and everyone knew everybody. So you've got a book of stories that's, I think, worth buying.
Yeah, no, thank you, Alan. It's called Reflections in Muddy Water. I wrote it a couple of years ago. It's available on Amazon. You can type in my name or the book name, and it'll come up. And I don't charge very much for it because it's not about that. I just want people to read it and get a good laugh out of it, because people ask me often why I wrote the book, and I've said, because that way of life is dying out. That was 2 years ago, and I think it's more than dying out now. It's pretty much already gone. I mean, you go around these small towns now, there's not a lot of old country stores left anymore.
No.
So, I try to keep that alive with the book, and, it's a lot of humorous things about what happened to me up there at that store that we owned for years, and all the lies that got told out on the benches and everything else that happened to me. So, if you get a chance to read it, I hope it would make your day.
And as you said, you changed the names to protect the stupid and the innocent.
Yeah, that's right, and the guilty.
And the guilty.
I changed the names the editors made me do it anyway. But
but they're all true stories.
They're all true. The only thing I did was change people's names. That's it. So a lot of people come to me after reading the book. They're like, "Are you serious? That happened?" I'm like, "Oh yeah."
Did people really do that?
There are 2 or 3 other people who witnessed that happen. So I got people to back me up on all of it.
It's great. If you want a little slice of life, old time Americana South, I mean, that book is great. It's sort of the modern humorist, the Mark Twain of your day.
Well, I'll take that, man. Louis Grizzard, Mark Twain.
I was going to say Louis Grizzard.
Yeah, Louis is the reason why I decided I wanted to ever write anything. He's amazing. And fellow Georgia Bulldog, and died too young, and I wish he was still out there, because we certainly need more Louis Grizzards.
Yeah, we need more satirists and humorists, period. Much like why we're covering Blazing Saddles.
That's right. Yeah, Louis Grizzard was the reason I bought the newspaper every day.
Yeah.
He had a column 4 days a week, I think, in the Atlanta Journal.
That's right.
And every day I used to buy the newspaper just for that.
Just for him, yeah. The same way for me.
When I first moved down here, I got one of his books, and I bought it simply because I was like, anybody who can come up with a title this funny has got to be really both intelligent and witty. And it was called My Daddy Was a Pistol and I'm a Son of a Gun.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, that is such a great title.
Don't sit under the grits tree with anybody but me. Yeah. That was another title.
Oh, yeah. He's got a lot of good titles. And, the stories that he tells, I mean, it's just his take on life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no mixing and matching. There's no fiction. It's just Lewis telling you what happened to him that day.
Yeah,
what he saw.
I think his best book was Shoot Low Boys. They're riding Shetland ponies.
That's a good one.
And
Chili Dogs Only Bark at Night.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the other one too. Yeah, good
It's
stuff.
amazing. Amazing.
All right. Well, I wish you much success. You deserve in that same pantheon. The style of writing is very much like that, and it's very funny. It's a very easy read, and I would highly recommend anyone who's listening, regardless of when you're listening to this, whether the day it's released or later on, always makes a good gift for somebody to just perk up their day. Walt, where can people learn a little bit more about the Wilder Ride?
Well, we mentioned yesterday our Facebook page. Today, if you have already gone there, one place that you might want to go is our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/The Wilder Ride. From there, we have some additional content that you can get for just a small donation of $10 a month, and some other ways that you can help out our show, help us cover some of the cost.
Excellent. Come back tomorrow, everyone. Friday, we continue looking at what's happening here on this On Location. We're back outdoors in the railroad setting, and we're going to continue looking at Charlie actually getting a drink of water, and we're going to end the minute tomorrow with a crowd all running up to greet Bart. So I guess we were right, Walt. That transition line really does mean something in script writing.
I guess it does.
Bart's going to show up, but a lot happens actually in between. But you got to come back tomorrow if you want to catch up on what's happening on this, The Wilder Ride.
You know, sometimes I feel like I'm just a pawn in the game of podcasting.
Sometimes I feel like the phony dog poo. Wait, what phony dog poo?
We should do one of these for the Big Lebowski.
Oh, absolutely. That's a bonus.
There we go. There's our next bonus.
Our next Patreon show. We'll do the Big Lebowski.
It's got to be. I mean, it's it's a foul-mouthed movie. It's got like the 7th most F words in it, but I don't care.
No, it doesn't. Does it?
Yeah.
I don't even pay attention.
It's got
like
a few.
283.
You haven't lived at my house.
I think
It's a mild.
I think what number 1 is. And I come to find out, I just checked the scores on Auburn is Auburn's probably win the SEC championship in basketball. So
in basketball,
yeah, it's not a good day.
So by the time this airs, we will have already had March Madness.
Yeah, so
I have to cut that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's
you got to keep it time sensitive.
Oh, okay. So I'm 4 days in it. So we're actually 4 days in advance. Yes.
So. It's
the 315 from Yuma.
Hey, well, we can leave that in now.
That's right. It was just making a timely appearance in our show.
It's the 415 to you, Harley.
We got to come back tomorrow, though, if you want to catch it up.